Hey, Jake, welcome yet again to another episode of the Red Delta Project. How's it going, man?
I'm good, man. I'm very good. How about yourself?
You doing good? You're staying healthy and sane and strong out there in the UK?
Yeah, man, I'm all good. If anything, it's pretty crazy. It's April and we're actually seeing the sun right now. So, you know, always something positive to look at.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so we're about a month into this whole self-quarantine thing. And so you've been doing a really good job in your videos. It's been an absolute joy to watch your YouTube videos growing. You just crossed over 25,000 subscribers, over
Mm,
2 million views. And a lot of your advice that you've been giving has been extremely practical for how to deal with working out and staying in shape, even though we don't have a gym. And obviously, being a part of the calisthenics world, that's right in your wheelhouse. But you've always had approaches to not just, okay, here's how you do push ups, but how to really make exercise fit into real life. And one of the things you brought up in your latest video was a way that we can keep a flexible approach and attitude, not just in exercise or even diet, but lifestyle in general with your pivot, adjust, adapt, and repeat approach. And so
yeah.
let's dive into that a little bit. Tell us more about this and how it's helping people cope with these difficult times.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, with my clients, we do group coach calls every Saturday. And I think sometimes when I like structure the call in advance and we actually put it in the actual call itself when it's live, I was just like, sometimes we can just come up with things like this on the spot. And so the fact that I just kept on saying pivot, adapt, adjust, repeat, it was like PAA. It just sounded good, right? I was like, it was one of those calls where it's like, it was so useful not only for myself, but also for my clients, where I was like, right, we need more people to know about this, right? Because obviously, I think, especially during this time of uncertainty, I knew that my clients and everyone in general needed more support, not just with working out and eating healthy, because like everyone knows how to do it, right? We all know like how to lose weight or how to build muscle. That we just got to put in the work. But now it's like the mindset shift, right? Because obviously everyone's lifestyles have been impacted, right? Um, all of our daily routines have changed to some degree, and so if there's really obviously like two, different approaches we can take about it. We can either have the news, the notifications turned on and dwell on all the negative news, which is something we can't do about, even though it's something that, of course, is very frightening. It's not something under our control. Or, we can look at our circumstances and just pivot, adapt, adjust, repeat. It's like there's people complaining that, uh, the supermarkets are out of chicken, but there's probably like half a dozen other protein sources in the supermarket that people could try, right? And I think especially when we look at working out, a lot of people initially obviously would use the excuse of not being able to go to the gym, whereas now it's like, well, that initially you knew you could always work out at home. So now this is an even greater opportunity to actually do that, especially as most of us are at home right now. We've actually got more time. We don't have to commute back and forth, so we've actually got more time to take care of our health. And even with, although this is not exactly a time that we'd all like to happen, it's still a case of, being able to see the positives from the negatives and actually being able to better ourselves. And in that sense, with obviously in the fitness industry, having more time to take care of our health and fitness, not only actually improve ourselves now, but also improve our quality of life when the world is back to normal. See what I mean?
I know exactly what you're saying. It's weird in some ways. This whole scenario is like, oh, if I only had time and if I only had this and that. Well, now we've got it, but we're facing a
Mm,
whole new set of challenges where we're now having to rely a little bit more on self-discipline, self-motivation, that intrinsic motivation. I'm running into a number of people who say, well, for the first week or so, it was fine, but I just have so much trouble getting myself going into a workout. There's something about going to a gym and being around other people, but when it's just you in your living room, it can be tough
mm.
to get that ball rolling. For people who are kind of in that boat, what would you recommend for that?
That's a really good question. I think obviously I've experienced that. I've experienced that myself. I think because of like the environment of the gym, it's like we know that when we step foot in the gym, it's like time to work out. Whereas usually our environment at home is time to relax and unwind, right? If we get back from work, it's time to chill, right?
Yeah.
So I think for the most part, for those who are new to working out in general, right? Not just when we were going to the gym initially or just at home in general. Obviously, we've got to like this is something I really teach everyone of. There's that like momentum gap, that momentum get bridge we have to like overcome, where initially like meal prepping or working out initially feels like a chore, initially feels like effort to do, right? Whereas once we actually get into the habit and start actually seeing results, it doesn't actually really feel like that much effort. It actually feels like just part of your routine, which is how it should be. All right. It shouldn't be a case of sticking to a diet because no one likes diets or a rigid exercise plan that you don't enjoy. It's about obviously understanding your goals and why you want to achieve them in the first place, where it just becomes habitual to do it. And I think for the mindset of getting into like that state of working out, um, one thing I don't encourage just in the gym, but also at home is to have like, I guess you could call like an anchor point, something that like divert your focus, if that makes sense. Because obviously, with how many thousands of thoughts the human mind accumulates a day, right? Obviously, without a focus point, whether we're in the gym or we're at home, if we go in our workout with all those thoughts running in our head, then it's very hard to get focused, right? It's very hard to focus on the reps, the sets and such if we're focusing on our emails or Instagram or what we're gonna cook for dinner tonight, right? So usually I think the best thing psychologically that people adapt well to is just music, right? Whether it's obviously at home, if you work out in the garage, just playing music in the garage, or just having some earphones on and just putting on songs that get you in the zone. It's personally what I've been doing for years. It works every time. Like I said, I'm not sure if you know, Matt, but like one of my weaknesses is procrastination and overthinking, particularly like overthinking. So if I have music going on in my ears, it's like I can't overthink. It's like the flow of like the music just makes me. It's like right, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Do you see what I mean?
I like that a lot. The music is definitely, it just kind of gets your energy flowing in the direction you want it to go. And I love how
Mm.
you mentioned the overthinking part, because I think that's another obstacle that we're running into during this quarantine is now it seemed like overnight social media and the internet is just being blasted with body weight routines and exercises and information. And not that we didn't have too much of it beforehand, but now we've got even more of it. And I'm finding that a lot of people I'm contacting with on email and through Instagram, they're really getting stuck into the overthinking and the paralysis by analysis because,
Mm.
oh, this person says this and you say that, and this other guy says this whole other thing and stuff. And they just get turned around. It's kind of like getting caught in the middle. What would you suggest to somebody who feels like they're in that scenario where they just don't know what is right and what direction to take?
I think, I mean, the answers always come by doing, not thinking. You know, I think the more, I don't know if it's called like the paradox of choice. It's like the more options we have, the less decisive we come. Whereas the less options we have, the more decisive we are. It's like there was, I think there was like a study. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, of like jams, of like there was a store, and like one time they sold like, I think it was like very few flavors of jam, and then another time they sold what like a huge variety of jam flavors, right? And so obviously you'd think that, oh, it's like when they sold more flavors, they probably would have made a lot more sales. But really, it was actually the complete opposite, because obviously if people got fewer decisions, it's like, right, I pick this or I pick this. But then if you've got all these options, it's like, where the hell do I start, right? It's kind of the same with all these Instagram and YouTube workout videos. It's like if you're just searching online for hours on which one to follow, you're not going to know what to follow. Whereas if you just pick one, it's like you just follow it, right? I think that's the best way to go about it. I mean, we can't really tell what's optimal. I think trying to be optimal actually makes things less optimal, because you get so caught in like the stress and anxiety, right? Which actually would impact your progress. I think it's just a case of doing. It's just actually doing something, right? There's especially with this virus and pandemic, it's like a lot of people saying the whole analogy of like something is better than nothing. And I mean, just doing something is how you're actually going to make progress. You're not going to make progress by just sitting there and thinking. It's like you take action, you get feedback, and then you adjust. It's like the pivot, adapt, adjust, repeat, right? This doesn't just apply to the pandemic. It applies like literally for everything you do.
Do you recommend that people build their own routine or they adopt a routine that's out there? Because I know you have a lot of resources for that yourself, but do you think ultimately people are better off one way or the other, or is it individual?
That's a good question. I honestly, you know what my answer is, but I can't give a so like black and white answer like that. I think, obviously, for me, when I first started my fitness journey in like when I was like 16, so 4 years ago, obviously I would just like look online for like YouTube workouts and that and just follow it because obviously that's what I had, right? And then initially I got to a point where I think especially with when we look at bodyweight exercises, it's not so um, black and white with weight of like you lift this amount of weight and then you gradually increase it. And so that's where I think, especially with body weight being more dependent on like the tendons and the joints, I think it only takes like one exercise to get wrong, and then boom, you got tendonitis, right? And you're set back for months. So for that reason, that's why I think over the last year, initially, I followed programs that obviously other people had made. And then over the past year, I've been working with my own coach where, again, getting over that analysis paralysis, it's like for me, I can't even decide what exercises to pick. It's like my coach is like, right, we're doing this for this amount of sets and reps, go do it. Right? There's no like room or space to try and think. It's just all laid out for me. And so obviously that is like technically speaking the way that you're going to get superior results. So it's just a case of what the person wants, right? It's a case of they want to make their own routine, which people find fun doing, or is it a case of just like um, putting the trust into someone else to follow a routine that they've already laid out and taking the guesswork out for you? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I really think that following or hiring a coach is like the ultimate shortcut in fitness because
Mm.
you can learn more from a coach in 5 minutes than you may figure out on your own in 5 weeks. And you'll
Yeah.
get more progress in 1 week than you may get in an entire year on your own.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's a case of obviously with doing it ourselves, the biggest thing we've got to obviously accept is the whole trial and error and human error process, right? Which is obviously inevitable when you are doing it yourself, even if you are very knowledgeable and such. And yeah, I think what I've learned with my own coach is not just obviously knowing what to do, but it's the coach telling you what not to do. And I think it's a lot of that stuff that he tells me not to do, I would most likely do by myself. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, I totally agree. I think in many cases, especially with self-led programs, there's more of a tendency to waste time and energy doing things that aren't all that productive. So I think that ties back to the phrase you were saying where trying to be optimal can actually be less than optimal in that case, where you're
Yeah.
trying to maximize your results by just spending as much as possible can actually hold you back. Let's dive into that a little bit more, this idea of optimization being less than optimal. What are some other examples that you've come across in your workouts and with coaching clients?
I guess it comes from the saying that there's this like your results are directly correlated to the amount of work you put in, which of course I would like to challenge because it's not necessarily the case, right? A big part of it is obviously recovery, right? It's like if someone's working out every day and they're not seeing results, the problem's not that work they're not working hard enough. It's that they've got no time to recover. All right. So it's actually a case of obviously if we know that if someone's working out every day and they're not seeing progress, well, I mean, here's the thing: if someone's still able to work out every day, they're probably not actually using the right exercise selection to actually push their muscles at a high enough intensity to the point where they actually need enough rest to actually regrow stronger. Because as we know, Matt, like growth comes during rest. It's not the actual workout, right? So, yeah, that's a big thing. Like I said, every time my progress was still down, or slowdown, should I say, with my coach, the problem was never the work I was putting in. It was a point of like a recovery issue. It was never like the workout. It was that I just wasn't recovering enough between sessions. So it was actually a case of either dropping back on the volume and or dropping back on like the volume and then increasing the intensity to compensate. So again, it's not a case of working harder. It's actually working smarter in the right areas, right?
Yeah, you have to know where you're putting your energy and effort. You can't just
Yeah.
work hard and expect it to pan out. And I think maybe it's less so these days, but I've noticed, especially in the past several years, that seems to be kind of the default for a lot of workout programs out there of like, let's just go and destroy ourselves with this hard workout. And just,
Yeah.
if it's a workout that leaves me in a puddle of blood, sweat, and tears afterwards, and that's satisfying kind of thing. And there's a lot of fun to that. And I used to do a lot of that too, where I used to ride my bike until I just couldn't walk anymore kind of stuff. And it was satisfying. It's a very satisfying feeling to push yourself to that level. But looking back, I realized that it probably was doing more harm than good, because I was trying to maximize my work, but I was minimizing my recovery.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, I think recovery is usually the biggest problem. I mean, recently, like I had a client doing like a full body routine, and got to a point where, as he's more advanced, like the intensity of the exercise was so high that it was just too hard to do, right? So it wasn't a case of, right, okay, you're struggling, let's add some more exercises and more volume to the workouts, right? That would just make it worse, right? It was just a case of, right, okay, instead of doing full body, let's split it into 2 workouts of upper lower, right? So obviously they can dedicate more time to each body part and actually not feel so exhausted from a full body session. Do you see what I mean?
I think a lot of it depends too on just fitting it into someone's circumstances. Like, what kind of time do you have? What kind of energy do you have? Are you short on time? Are you getting your workouts in after a work day and you're just not having a lot of time and energy, or do you have plenty of it? It's so individualized, but at the end of the day, it's still the same format of work intelligently, recover adequately. Now, I don't know about things over there in the UK, but over here in the US, the talk is starting to turn a little bit towards there may be a bit of an end in sight to this quarantine thing. Some folks are saying, oh, maybe in a couple of weeks, things are going to start opening up. So no, it seems almost like a cruel twist of fate where this is going to possibly last just long enough for us to find a new rhythm and a new habit with our diet and exercise habits, and then it's going to change again. So with that on the horizon, what advice would you have to people when they're re-entering into their older routine? But things are going to be different. I mean, they're not going to go back to the way they were before. Something's going to be different. What would you say that people should keep in mind with maintaining momentum they've built up or regaining momentum they've lost as we return back to kind of business as usual?
That's a good question. I think the best thing to do is to prepare yourself now. I think a lot of people are in a state where it's like, even now, it's like, even though so much of us have like twice as much time, people still don't think it's the right time. It's like whatever time do you want, right? I think the best thing to do is actually prepare now, as we've got more time to actually, you know, learn new things and implement new strategies with our nutrition, our training, our sleep, all of that, right? Physical, mental health, the list goes on. So, I mean, if we want to be best prepared for when the world's back to normal, right? We know that when the world's back to normal, most of us are going to have less spare time on our hands. So obviously, it's going to be much easier to actually adhere to a healthy style of living. If we want to be well equipped to know how to work out and adhere to a healthy style of living when we're busy, the best time to do that is to know how to do it when we've got more time. Do you see what I mean? Whereas a lot of people, when they've got little to no time, they never actually find the time to learn how to do it in the first place. Do you see what I mean? Whereas now, as we've actually got the time, I got the time to actually learn and implement it. So instead of it being like some extra effort, it can actually then become a habit, like with the weeks to come. So it's actually even less effort when the world's back to normal. Do you see what I mean? So it's about, you know, pivoting, adapting, adjusting now. So it's like you're more equipped and more prepared when you've got less time.
Now, let's say
So, yeah.
on the other end of the spectrum, we've got somebody who the quarantine hit and they're like, oh, I'll get to my workout. And now it's several weeks down the road and they're still at zero. They haven't even gotten the ball rolling. And it's something that they kind of feel bad, like I should be doing this, but I'll start it tomorrow, kind of, and they keep putting it off. What advice would you give to that individual?
You just gotta get off your backside and just get going. It's like it's like you gotta get going. I think especially when we look at fitness, I think a lot of people only look at it from the side of just looking better without a shirt on, right? But obviously we know there's a lot more to that. And I think once it's like, to put into perspective, when I, obviously onboard new clients, we go through this process of knowing or understanding what their real motivating factors, right? Obviously, it's like on the surface, they'll say, I want to build some muscle, lose some fat, so I can look better. But obviously, if I just like dig deeper into it, there's some very deep, emotional core factors that actually drive them. And that's what actually drives them. So when they actually refer back to that, that's what actually keeps them going. It's not actually the physical benefits that so many people actually after. It's, things that matter much more to them internally. And I think when they've got a really strong why, they just do it. You know what I mean? And it's just a case of understanding that, being physically and mentally fit and healthy, it makes life a lot easier, right? It's like a lot of people think that exercising and meal prepping and that takes time, but the endorphins rush you get from the workouts that then 10x your productivity in the day, right? And how the healthy nutrition boosts your mood and your mental function. It's like you actually get more time back from that rather than just, eating Doritos and watching Netflix all day.
It's very easy to kind of grind things to a bit of a halt, especially if you're not getting outside very much. You can spend all day inside and in your home, and it's very easy to just be very sedentary and have your mind just kind of start to shut down a little bit. So that's why I still encourage people, get outside as much as you can, even if it's just out on your back deck or in your backyard, and be outdoors in the sunshine and stuff, to get outside. But when we're talking about building habits, do you think it's more productive to go with a slow, gradual approach, or is it more of a jump right in with both feet and really commit and do everything you can right from the get-go?
I think the first option of slowly adapting to it, because that's how we form habits. It's a case of like starting it and then adapting to it. It's a bit like, obviously, with the pivot, adapt, adjust. It's a bit like forming the habit initially. It's a bit like pivoting, right? Obviously, it's pivoting, going from working out occasionally to actually having a solid plan throughout the week. And then it's a case of, well, I'm just trying to think, pivot, adapting to it, and then adjusting, right? So then once you actually get used to that habit, it's a case of, right, just raise the standard of this, right? So let's say someone gets poor sleep. So they only sleep like 4 hours a night. And it's like, right, let's get you on 10 hours of sleep. They're not going to do that, right? Are they? It's like, not just because of the willpower, whatever, but it's the case of like the mind just isn't used to that amount of sleep. So it's like, right, let's start with like 5 hours and 6 hours and 7 hours and 8 hours. It's much easier to adapt to that. And it's a case of like, if someone does it slowly like that and actually improves, it's easier to actually sustain it and remain consistent with it. Whereas someone who goes from 0 to 100 is not going to be able to sustain it because their body isn't actually used to it. And obviously, if your body isn't used to it, your body's going to fight against you and be like, right, okay, let's not do this. Whereas if you just take one thing at a time, it's a bit like, if we look at bodyweight exercise, it's like someone going from like, it's like someone who can't do a single pull-up. It's like, right, I'm going to do 10 pull-ups now. It's like, well, no, you're not. You're not strong enough. Right? It's like, we've all got to start somewhere, right? So it's not a case of, right, let's go all in. Who cares if I'm not strong enough? It's like, I've got to be all in, right? It's a case of, no, let's start with some body rows or assisted pull-ups. It's like progressive overload in training. I think doing that with habits is how you can sustain it, because we know that if we go all in too soon with exercise, we get injured. it's the kind of same with habits, right? Instead of physically getting hurt, like mentally you'd get hurt. Do you see what I mean? If you just do it gradually and actually gradually increase the intensity, or not so much the intensity, but when we look at habit, we're talking about like the standard of that habit. It's much easier to actually form it and then ingrain that habit. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I like how you phrase that with the standard of the habit, because standards are personal in many
Yeah.
ways. Where for some people a standard is to run a mile a day. For other people, the standard is to watch at least 3 hours of television. And it's really a case of what's your standard versus my standard. But it's not even comparison of one to another. It's changing your standard over time. If someone is starting to kind of hit a little bit of a lull with their motivation right now, where they've been doing things, but things are starting to feel a little stale. They're starting to feel like their routine is getting a little boring, that they were gung ho for at the start of this whole quarantine thing, but now things are getting a little boring. What would you say is the best way to kind of keep things fresh and alive for home workouts?
I think it depends. I mean, it's you've got to ask yourself. It's like, is it a case of wanting variety because you've been doing the same thing for so long, or is it a case of just trying to stay busy, right? Because as we know, there's a big difference between busyness and productiveness, and I think a lot of people are on that side of just trying to like, oh, let's do some variety to shock the muscles, when we know that like growing bigger and stronger muscles comes from progressive overload of a consistent pattern, which obviously can't come from constantly changing the workouts every week. I'd say, like I've experienced myself, if you do get to a point where you are doing, let's say, the same kind of routine over and over again, then you may want to mix things up. Whether I don't know, it's, let's say, I don't know, something as simple as like if someone wanted to increase their vertical pulling strength, obviously if they're getting bored of chin-ups, they can just do pull-ups, or they could do the neutral grip pull-ups.
So you're kind of going along an approach I often like to give people, where instead of giving people different things, I give them the same thing but done different ways.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you really change what you do, but you do it the same way, oftentimes you're really not changing as much as you think. Like I made that mistake way early on in my training career, like over 20 years ago, where I would be like, okay, I'm going to do barbell bench press. And then a couple workouts later, I'd say dumbbell bench press. But I would still do the same general movement pattern, and I would still be using a weight that was roughly like 3 sets of 10. So
Mm.
I was using a different tool and my hands were somewhat in a different position, but for the most part, I was still working my muscles the same way. Versus if I said, okay, I'm going to do like dumbbell bench press today, but next time I'm going to see how many push-ups can I do in 5 minutes, and I'm really more volume and I go on. So the movement pattern is similar, but I'm making my muscles work in such a new dynamic way. And I've always found that to be a little bit more of a way to keep things moving forward, and yet at the same time having the variety. So instead of different exercises, same basic exercise, but different format. So do your programs have variety in how you're approaching things like that, or is it changing up the exercise, or a combination of the two?
I mean, it depends on the client and such. I mean, for the most part, it's like I take into account their goals, and then it's a case of like if they plateau on a movement and it's not recovery, that's the issue, whatever, then we may actually again do something same but different. It can be something as simple as doing the exact same exercise with a different rep speed or a rep tempo, because that completely changes the stimulus, right? Or if we look at like periodization, right, we know we've got the central nervous system, some of the neurological system, and the physiological system, which is obviously, the muscles primarily, right? And
Yeah.
so obviously we know that in order to, build muscle and strength, we need a combination of the two, right? It's like if we focus so much on higher reps, building muscle, then eventually we're going to hit a point where the central nervous system isn't strong enough to continuously progress, right? But at the same time, if you focus so much on strength, primarily training the central nervous system, then we know eventually we're going to plateau if we don't actually have enough muscle mass from the physiological system to support those strength gains, right? So it can also be a case of periodization. So if someone literally focuses on like 3 sets of 10 for so long, right, maybe worth, it's like, right, they may plateau because they actually need to focus on, you know, strengthening the central nervous system. So it's like going from 3 sets of 10 to 3 sets of 5, or 5 by 5, or 5 sets of 3 reps. I don't know. Do you see what I mean?
And one more time, just coming right back to that whole idea of optimization being less than optimal. I think a trap that a lot of us fall into, that I used to fall into, is we'll find a method that for whatever reason we mentally or emotionally we bond with it, and we think this is the best way to do this exercise. This is the correct or optimal way to be training. So you may think optimal is doing low reps or high reps or 5 by 5 or whatever. So then when someone comes around and they're like, all right, let's see if we can do 100 pull-ups today, just to really get some volume. Or if they're used to doing 100 pull-ups, let's see if we can't get, 3 sets of really hard progressive, like, one-handed pull-ups or something like that. And I know there's some stickiness there, some friction but this is the best way to go about it, and this is the way I'm supposed to do it, and that's my standard. And now this guy over here is saying I should do something else. There's either confusion of, well, which one is best, or screw that, I know this is best, I'm just going to stay with that. Both of those aren't really going to really help you very much. So how can we have more of a flexible approach to give ourselves permission to explore multiple ways of working out?
I think it's really a case of understanding and like actually having the right knowledge, as we said. I think it's not a case of, as we said, working harder, it's working smarter. I think a lot of working smarter comes by having the right knowledge on the right things. It's like, I think a reason why people may plateau or not know what to do, it's not so much a lack of resources, it's just a lack of knowledge. And usually a lack of knowledge comes from a lack of understanding of the principles. Do you see what I mean? I think if you understand the principles, then you can basically do anything you want. Because obviously we know that low reps and high reps all have their place, different types of periodization, rep tempo, and that all of them have their place. And we know that we need to utilize a wide variety of them in the long term to actually make gains. It's just a case of understanding the principles of like strength training, progressive overload, recovery, deloads, and all of that. So we know that there's no like optimal given, like this is the only thing we need to do at this given point in time, because we know there's many ways to skin a cat. But it's a case of actually knowing which variables to utilize at the right given time. And again, that comes through understanding the principles rather than just like searching online endlessly on YouTube or Google hoping for the answer, right?
I like that. I think that's a perfect place to start wrapping things up. Jake, it's always a pleasure talking to you, man. I always love your insights. Tell the people where they can find more about you and your programs, man.
So regarding my programs, of course, when it comes to one-on-one coaching with me, you can learn more at my website, www.jgcalisthenics.co.uk. Obviously, you got to do the www. Otherwise, if you don't, it doesn't come up for some reason. As well as there is my new monthly programs, which is it's more on the low key right now, because obviously those who have signed up, as it's new, I'll kind of want to like test how things go for them first on the app before kind of like mention it more. So I think if people wanted to learn more about that, I think the best thing to do is go on my latest YouTube video, JG Calisthenics, right? And then if you go in my description of the YouTube video, you'll see towards the top, it'll be new monthly programs, and then you can actually see there. Or if you're unsure of anything, just hit me up on social media, JG Calisthenics.
Awesome. Yeah. And I certainly highly recommend everybody check out Jake's YouTube videos. I mean, we started talking right when you started your YouTube channel a few years ago. Well, maybe not even that long ago, maybe just a year or two. I have to dig back into the archives, but it has been an absolute thrill watching it grow and progress. And some of the best information for just real, honest, down home. It's kind of like home cooking for workouts. Like, this is the real stuff. It's not like high hoity-toity, elite level only kind of stuff. This is workouts that I think everyone can relate to, advice everyone can relate to. You're so real, you're so honest. It's such a breath of fresh air on YouTube when you seem to have a very open and honest conversation with us with every video. So everybody check out Jake's videos. I highly recommend it. Couldn't be a better use of time when you're in this whole quarantine sort of deal. Jake, thank you so much for your time. It's
been a pleasure. Thank you.
Sincerely appreciate it. And to those listening, again, I appreciate your time and attention as well. Links to everything for Jake's resources are at reddeltaproject.com or down in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. But I'll talk to you folks next week. Till then, be fit, live free.